For gamers. Have you ever found a video game that you liked so much that you found yourself playing it over and over again? Sure, probably 100% of gamers find at least one, if not many games that they like so much that they constantly play them. Games like the Batman Arkham series, The Last of Us, the Mass Effect series, the Uncharted series. These games have a huge fan base of gamers that replay them over and over again. But what's the cost? The cost is other games. While gamers are playing the same games over and over again, there are other games out there that are sitting on shelves collecting dust. Some of them are boring, but others are good games that just didn't get much hype or advertisement. Me personally, I own 10 game consoles and well over 600 video games, but I've only beaten about a third of my collection, and many of my games I've never even played due to my constant replaying. But all that is about to change, as I've decided to go on a video game quest to beat every game that I own. Then I bring my opinion and review of each game here on my channel in hopes of spreading the word about decent games that are out there and other games that just need to be skipped. And I'm happy to say that I'm well on my way, as I've already completed several different games. With that being said, I'm Adam Davidson, and let's get started with game number 1. Cold Fear is a survival horror game released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2. In it, you play a CIA agent named Jason Bennett, who ends up on a Russian ship after members of the Coast Guard go radio silent. On board, he not only finds Russians willing to shoot him the moment they see him, but also strange creatures that crawl into the dead bodies and turn them into zombies. Soon, your search and rescue mission turns into a fight for survival as you learn about a failed experiment and must find information and extract it. The mission eventually leads the character from a ship onto an oil rig that is also full of creatures ready to kill you. This is a classic survival horror game with a great setting and story. Though it wasn't created by Capcom, there is a lot of similarities between it and the Resident Evil series. Numerous doorways lining narrow, twisting hallways, plenty of enemies, jump scares, an extremely scary setting. It's a good game. But even good games have flaws. First is the melee attack, though attack isn't the right word, as it's actually used to push your enemies back so you can get a better shot at them. However, the targeting seems to be a little bit off, and you'll actually take a little bit of damage before you can successfully connect with your melee. Next, the game has numerous hallways and locations, yet you have no map to guide you. Nothing to even show you where you need to go, not even an arrow that leads you in the direction of your objective. Some gamers like this, as it gives you an opportunity to explore, but the main story will have you moving all over the area that you can explore during the gameplay, and you will find yourself low on ammo and wondering where you need to go while numerous enemies surround you. Overall, this is a pretty good game. If you have a very large game collection, then you probably won't end up replaying this game. However, if your collection is small, I can see fans of the survival horror games replaying this game at least once or twice more. Personally, I would say, check this game out. The next game on the list is Slender: The Arrival. This game is only available as a downloadable game on the modern day consoles, and it features the newest upcoming horror icon, Slender Man. In this first-person game, you play an unknown character who, armed with a camera, goes into a house in the middle of the woods to investigate. You find that has been ransacked, and there are strange drawings on the wall. In an upstairs room, you find numerous pages of drawings and words. And next, you hear a scream coming from the woods, and you have to go and investigate, and soon find yourself being stalked by the Slender Man. You soon find yourself investigating the mystery of two individuals who apparently had issues with the Slender Man, and you must find out what happened to them. This game is amazing, and any fan of horror games would agree. Whether you play the game in the middle of the night or the middle of the day, the darkened atmosphere can send chills down your spine. You go through several stages, having to complete small objectives such as finding pieces of paper around the dark woods or looking for 6 generators in underground tunnels, all while being pursued by the Slender Man and a few other enemies. In this game, there is no way to fight back and no place to hide. The only thing you can do is run, but you never know if you're running away from danger or towards it. This game does have some flaws. First is the ending. After everything you go through, the ending just seemed kind of like a flop, like the ending of the Blair Witch Project. It leaves more questions than answers. However, after you beat the game, you unlock another creepy level and a new difficulty level. The other flaw? It's only an hour long. About an hour and 10 minutes total. The game only costs $5 online, and it will be the best $5 a gamer could spend. As a horror game fan, I can definitely say that despite the game only being an hour, I loved playing it and I will play it again. I suggest you play it at least once. My next game is Condemned: Criminal Origins for the Xbox 360. Released in 2005, this game has you play FBI agent Ethan Thomas, who is called to a crime scene to investigate a dead body, the newest victim to a murderer deemed Serial Killer X. Upon investigating the rest of the building, you witness the death of 2 police officers before you are knocked out. When you come to, you find that you are the one wanted for the death of the officers. Now you must go on the run, trying to find the evidence to clear your name and catch the killer. Only 2 people believe your innocence. One is an FBI technician named Rosa, who helps you collect the evidence you need. Next is a strange old man named Malcolm, who claims to be a friend of your father's. This game is a first-person melee game. Though there are some guns, the ammo is so limited that you basically have to stick with your melee weapons as you fight through numerous locations against numerous psychotic criminals. The game is repetitive, though. There are a total of 10 chapters, each chapter about 35 to 45 minutes long, and though the locations change, the gameplay doesn't. While you melee attack against the enemies, you have to find evidence and complete a small objective. Sure, when you get pretty far into the game, the enemies do get harder, some of the objectives are cool, and there is a kick-ass boss fight at the end. The game is very repetitive, almost to the point that had I not been on a quest to beat every game I own, I probably would have turned the game off halfway through. It has a decent story, but the story is heavily affected by the repetitive gameplay. The game does have 2 different endings, however, it's not based on gameplay or choices you make throughout the game, but is actually from a single choice that you make at the end of the game. In order to get the other ending, you'll have to replay the game and select the other one at the end, and I'm gonna say that the game wasn't fun enough that I'd be willing to play through again. The box cover to this game is very misleading, making the game seem dark and scary, and though there may be a jump scare from time to time, it fails. This is a game that was overhyped and needs to be collecting dust on a shelf. I would skip it. The next game is Grand Theft Auto 3, and I know, as a gamer I should be ashamed that I didn't beat this game back in 2001 when it first came out, but hey, I reached a mission I just couldn't beat. In GTA 3, you play a man named Claude who is screwed over by his girlfriend during a heist and leaves you for the police. You are eventually broken out and soon become a hired driver and gunman for numerous factions, including the Mafia and the Chinese Triad. The main story of the game is unimportant as every mission has its own small story to enjoy. The missions vary, anything from just driving a person around to being the getaway driver during a heist to going on a shooting spree. I mean, this game is known for its violence. Those who have played the later installments of the GTA series will notice something about GTA 3. It's really short in comparison. Including side missions and street racing, there is a total of 73 missions in the whole game, and you can beat the main story after only completing about 40 of them. At one point, I had 3 locations I could have went to for missions. However, if you stick to one of them long enough, one of the other 2 will disappear, which sucks. And the final mission doesn't feel like the climax of the game. Sure, you have to shoot about 30 bad guys, chase and shoot down a helicopter, but hell, I'd faced harder challenges earlier in the game and didn't even know it was the final mission until the credits started to roll. But probably the worst thing about this game is the driving mechanics. Took forever to catch on to and doesn't follow physics at all. One minute you could crash through anything, and the next a pebble could stop you dead. And ramming into other cars? Hell, if a car hits you, you will lose control. And if you hit the other car, you will lose control. Street racing sucked. GTA 3 is a classic and a great game, and if you do decide to play the game, you will have fun. However, the game is really outdated. While in later installments you can do numerous other things like surf the web, go on dates, or even get into high-stakes pool games, GTA 3 is just a basic play the missions and end the game. It's heavily outdated. Still a classic that you can have fun with, but I believe if you have an itch to play a GTA game, I'd stick with the more recent installments. The next game is a PlayStation 2 game titled Gun, released back in 2005. It is a game for cowboy fans taking place in the 1800s in the Old West. In it, you play a cowboy named Cole who is on a steamboat with his father when suddenly a reverend named Joseph Reed leads a group of soldiers onto the boat for an attack. Realizing the steamboat couldn't be saved, your father throws you overboard. You wake up 3 days later with revenge for your father on your mind. However, as you search for the Reverend, you find out that he is just the least of your worries, as his boss, a man named Magruder, has big plans that can affect everyone in the West. If you are a fan of cowboys, cowboy movies, TV shows, and games, this is a game for you. It has you getting involved with marshals, Indians, and bandits, having to get into shootouts at the saloon and attempting to save a carriage from Indian attacks. The graphics are pretty decent, as is the gameplay, and during the game you can build up a quick draw meter that helps you aim easier and move from target to target better. Besides the main story, there are plenty of side missions, including finding people on wanted posters, helping farmers, and even delivering for the Pony Express, all which can help you build your stats such as melee, shooting, and even horse riding skills. The story starts to go dry after about an hour of gameplay. However, when you start coming to the climax of the game, it really starts to get fun again, including putting you into 3 difficult boss battles. The game itself was decent. It had its fun moments, but probably only about an hour and a half of this 5-hour game is really worth playing. Personally, it was decent enough to play one time. However, for me, it has no replay value. However, if you are a huge fan of cowboy-themed games, then this is probably the perfect game for you. If you're not a fan, this game's okay to skip. Next, we are going to Mega Man X. It is a classic game for the Super NES and is one of the 21 games included in the Super NES Mini released in 2018. In Mega Man X, you are a human cyborg that comes across an enemy named Sigma who proves to be way too powerful to destroy. Instead of fighting Sigma, you as Mega Man go through 8 different worlds, fighting over obstacles and small-time enemies. At the end of every level, you must battle a cybernetic animal boss that is armed with a special attack. Upon defeating that boss, you not only upgrade your armor and health, but also acquire their special attacks for your own use. After completing the 8 levels, you should be powerful enough to go to Sigma's fortress, where you will take on more numerous obstacles, small-time enemies, and Sigma himself, along with the enemy bosses for a second time. This was my first time playing a Mega Man game, and though it didn't exactly make me a huge Mega Man fan where I want to play all the other games, it is a fairly fun game, challenging at times, and shows that more modern games spoil gamers. I can't remember the last time I played a game where I only had a limited amount of chances to defeat a level before starting over, or having very limited health. It's a very simplistic game, but that's really what makes it challenging. If you're into old school games that throw out a good challenge, then give Mega Man X a shot. However, if you are a gamer who gets angered easily when you believe the computer is screwing you over, well, Mega Man X is a game that might have some gamers breaking their controllers. But, despite that, I'd say, give the game a shot. Staying with the classics, next is Super Mario Bros. 3, one of the 30 games available on this regular Nintendo Mini. Easily one of the favorite Mario adventure games, no doubt one of the best of the originals. In it, you play Mario going through 8 different worlds, each world full of levels and castles to defeat, and at the end of the first 7 worlds, you go into a castle to find a king has been transformed into a creature, and you must board a Koopa ship and dodge bullets and cannonballs as you make your way to battle a Koopa and steal back the magic wand. All the worlds are dedicated to a certain theme, whether it's the desert, water, or lava, and the levels within that world are based off of that theme. Also, the further you get into the game, the more levels you have to complete per world. But what makes this Mario game so awesome is that it's the first one to introduce an inventory screen. Throughout the game, you can enter a mushroom hut and select one of 3 chests, each one holding a certain power-up, such as the mushrooms, flower power, or even special suits like turtles, frogs, and raccoons. Whatever you select will end up in your inventory screen, and at any time between levels, you can select a power-up from the inventory screen to give you an upper hand before you enter the level. 2 of the most popular items is the Cloud and the Warp Whistle. While the Cloud will allow you to skip over a level, a Warp Whistle will actually allow you to skip that world and a few other worlds. I have beaten this game numerous times when I was younger, however, I always used the Cloud or Warp Whistle, so I never beat all the levels in each world. Until now. This game was released in 1988, and 40 years later, it is still an all-time classic that you can have fun with for hours, and it can even be a bit of a challenge to experienced gamers in later worlds. If you have lived under a rock and never played Super Mario Bros. 3, you have been missing out and need to find a way to play this game. The next game is a recent release called Detroit Become Human. It's from the same creators that gave us Beyond Two Souls and Heavy Rain, 2 amazing interactive games. In Detroit Become Human, the year is 2038, and technology is truly starting to take off, like hologram magazines and driverless cars. But the biggest advance is androids. Androids that come extremely close to resembling humans and are part of the workforce, everything from security guards to housekeepers and babysitters. Though many people love having androids, others believe they steal jobs and need to be destroyed. In this game, you play 3 different androids through 3 different stories that eventually come together. First is Connor, a top-of-the-line android that has been given the highest ranking job of any android. He is an investigator, teamed up with Lieutenant Hank Anderson to investigate deviant androids that somehow went against their programming and killed their human owners. With just a taste, Connor can do a DNA scan and can also scan the locations and digitally put all the evidence together and play out the crime. Next is Kara, a housekeeper to a man named Todd, who is a single parent to a young girl named Alice. After finding out that Todd is abusive to his daughter and realizing that he might have intentions to kill her, Kara fights against her programming in an attempt to save Alice, and soon the two go on the run. Eventually they learn that Canada doesn't have androids, so Kara disguises herself as a human, and both her and Alice fight their way out of the country. Finally is a man named Marcus. He is a manservant to an elderly artist named Carl. The two have mutual respect for each other, but after a break-in at Carl's house, a mistake in an identity has Marcus being taken away from his life. He eventually finds out about Jericho, a ship where runaway androids go to be free. However, Marcus realizes that all they're doing is hiding. Instead, he takes over as the leader of Jericho and ends up leading the androids against the human race in an attempt to become equal and free. First off, I have to say that this possibly had the best graphics I'd ever seen on the PlayStation 4. Second, if you are into games where there's tons of action and fighting and gun shooting, this game is not for you. However, if you like amazing stories, button prompting, and environment interaction, this game is so for you. This game, a lot like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, is the best example of a game that allows you to create a story and have your choices determine how the game plays out. Remember Telltale's video game The Walking Dead? Awesome game that allowed you to somewhat control how the game played out, but with restrictions. Detroit Become Human has very little restrictions, as almost every decision you make affects not only how the game ends, but how the level plays out as well. There is a total of 34 levels, and each level has tons of decisions that you have to make to play out the story, which you literally create as you play. At the end of each level, you are shown a flowchart that shows which paths you have played and which ones you still need to unlock. Even doing a few optional objectives can unlock hidden paths. The decisions you make can not only affect how certain characters see you, but also how the general public looks at you, which can possibly influence the player on their decisions. For example, in Marcus's storyline, he is trying his best to lead the androids to freedom. Your decisions will determine whether he will try to do it peacefully or violently. Just like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human does have a bit of a twist at the end, which was usually the flaw, because once you play the game, once you know the twist, the game loses something special. But Detroit Become Human fixed that flaw by literally giving numerous different types of outcomes for each character, so you can play this game several times and still see something new. And another cool concept is that you can actually make decisions early in the game that can have stories for certain characters suddenly end, so they can't reach the climax of the game. There are very few games out there that are like Detroit Become Human. Again, it's more of a button prompting game with an amazing story. So those who like good stories and making decisions that affect the game, Detroit Become Human is perfect for you, and this game has plenty of replay value. Next is Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee for the GameCube. This game is your typical fighting game like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. However, it stars Godzilla and the long list of monsters that have appeared in numerous Godzilla movies. This game has 3 modes. Battle, which has the player play an exhibition fight against either the computer or a second player. Survival mode, in which you select a monster and attempt to beat as many monsters in a row as you can before you are defeated. And adventure mode, or story mode, in which you select a monster to go through the story mode. However, there is very little story to it. At the beginning, you learn that aliens have taken over all the monsters on Monster Island. And so, you just get thrown from one battle to another, going from city to city, fighting different monsters. This game leaves a lot to be desired. The lack of story is just the beginning, but the controls are absolutely terrible. With so many buttons that do so many different things that aren't arranged in a great order, it takes forever to catch on what each button does, and it sucks during battles. And some moves don't even work. At one point, I was playing Godzilla against King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah takes to the sky and starts to hover, so I went to use my fire breath, only Godzilla wouldn't look up, so even if the fire went that way, it didn't even hit the enemy. Also, the buildings around you get destroyed, which is cool, but it makes moving terrible. Numerous times, first aid popped up during battles, but I couldn't get to them because the small remains of a building kept me from moving forward. This game is an absolute mess, and even big fans of Godzilla will hate it, and at times the game seems unplayable and so frustrating that gamers will most likely stop playing and never play again. This game doesn't deserve the time or day, and is definitely a skip. Up next is Final Fantasy X Remastered. This game was originally released on the PlayStation 2 in 2001, but was remastered for later consoles in 2013. In this game, you play 18-year-old Titus, whose hometown of Zanarkand is attacked by a large sphere known only as Sin. Eventually, Titus is sucked into Sin and sent 1,000 years into the future. There, you meet Wakka, Lulu, and Kamari, 3 guardians to a young woman named Yuna. As it turns out, Yuna is a summoner who, while being protected by her guardians, will go on a pilgrimage to earn aeons she will use to fight Sin and bring the calm. Titus and Yuna hit it off, and though Titus can't become an official guardian, she asks for him to escort her also. Along the way, you meet Yuna's father's former guardian Auron, and also an Albez soldier named Riku. There's a lot of details to the story, and I really don't want to ruin any of it for you, but I will tell you, it's amazing. This is an amazing adventure game where you discover mystical creatures and take on plenty of enemies. This game is full of adventure, action, drama, and yes, it even turns into a love story that has a twist at the end that will tug at your heartstrings. There are no other stories out there like Final Fantasy games, and Final Fantasy is probably one of the best stories I've ever seen in a game. The Final Fantasy games are an acquired taste, and not many people can deal with the long length of these games as they do take time and patience. But of the huge fan base for Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy X delivers. There's only one major flaw in this game, and that is the sphere grid, which is how characters in the game level up, increasing their health, their magic defense, and how they learn abilities. Starting the game, the sphere chart can seem a bit confusing, but as you get further into the game, it turns into nothing and it's extremely easy. However, the sphere chart allows you to choose paths you want to follow to learn abilities, but you have to be sure you scout ahead to make sure that your path doesn't get blocked, or you'll have to take part of numerous battles just to earn enough moves to go backwards on the chart and take a different path. The remastered graphics are amazing, and it's the first Final Fantasy game to have actual voiceovers. If you've ever been interested in getting involved in Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy X would probably be one of the best ones to start with. Though I haven't played all the other Final Fantasy games, or even half of them, I can say that it will take a lot to knock Final Fantasy X off of my top 5 list. Despite being fairly long, this game is more than good enough to have a replay potential, and I highly suggest it if you haven't already played it at least once. Our next game is, of course, Final Fantasy X-2. Released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2, but it was remastered and re-released in 2013. Final Fantasy X-2 is a direct sequel to 10. Taking place 2 years after the events of 10, you play Yuna, who is now a celebrity, the Grand High Summoner who officially defeated Sin. Though she is grateful for her people, she misses the adventurous life. But the adventurous life comes and finds her when she sees a sphere that plays a video that seemingly shows Titus in some kind of distress. Seeing the video, Yuna decides to attempt to find Titus. Joining her is Riku from Final Fantasy X and newcomer Pain. Together, they become sphere hunters, searching for rare and valuable spheres that might unlock more videos of Titus. Along the way, however, they uncover a 1,000-year-old love story between a summoner named Lien and her lover Shayun that ended in tragedy. Yuna and her friends also discover that Shayun commandeered a large weapon known as Vendagun in an attempt to stop a war and save Lien. Now it seems as if Shayun is still alive and is going to attempt to use Vendagun on Spira. Now Yuna, Riku, and Pain have to attempt to stop him. There are actually several things that combine with the main story and gives it a little bit more action and detail. But first off, the remastered graphics are amazing, and I'm happy that they brought back the same fighting style and even brought back the easier way of leveling up by just competing in battles instead of having to use a sphere grid. However, leveling up isn't any picnic, whereas in Final Fantasy X you gain 200 points towards your health points every time you level up. In X-2, your points only go up about 70 and your magic only increases by 2. Also, there is no limit breaks in Final Fantasy X-2. Instead, they have dress spheres that not only change their outfits but also their abilities. A white mage dress sphere will give the wearer white magic such as cure or bringing people back to life. A black mage sphere will give the wearer dark magic like lightning and blizzard. There are tons of dress spheres all over Spira. Some you find on the main quest, some on side quests. Though they are helpful in battles, you find that the health points and magic points are different. While in one dress sphere you have a 2800 HP points, another one could knock you down to 1700. So I guess it's all about strategy. Another major thing that was different, that is unlike in Final Fantasy X, where the story guides you through the game, Final Fantasy X-2 gives you an open world Spira, where you can travel all over and choose to either do the main quest or side quests. And the main story doesn't have a lot of detail, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of where you're supposed to go. Players will also find that the final boss fight is actually extremely easy in comparison to the smaller battles that you have to fight just to get there. Possibly one of the things that a lot of people didn't like about Final Fantasy X-2 is the fact that, unlike most Final Fantasy games where you get several characters, X-2 only gives you the 3 main girls. Now sure, you can capture creatures, level them up, and throw them into battle instead of one of your characters, but the tutorial for it is extremely confusing and the whole thing is completely pointless. Also, this game has several different endings, however you have to do certain tasks to unlock each of them, and the one that should be the actual ending of the game is the hardest to unlock. All in all, I won't say that I strongly dislike Final Fantasy X-2. I didn't consider it a waste of time and do like the idea that I beat it, while many of my friends either skipped it or only played a few hours. The lack of action in the game can really test a gamer's patience, and the magic of Final Fantasy X-2 isn't as amazing as it was in 10. If you want to play all the Final Fantasy games, go ahead and play this game as it does have a few interesting parts. However, to most gamers, Final Fantasy II is a one-time play for me and a suggested game to skip. Next up is one of Capcom's great games, Dino Crisis. In this PlayStation Classic, you play Regina, a woman in a 4-person search and rescue mission sent to a science facility on an island to extract a Dr. Kirk. Upon arriving, you find that almost everyone is dead and dinosaurs are everywhere. You mostly have to deal with the T-Rex, the pterodactyls, and the velociraptors that roam the halls and come from literally anywhere, whether it's through windows, ceiling grates, or just waiting on the opposite side of the door, ready to strike. But the dinosaurs are only part of the challenge, as there are numerous doors and areas that require you to have a key card to access. You'll have to find yourself searching for key cards along with passwords and even DNA in an attempt to rewrite the key cards to access other areas. There are several puzzles to solve and plenty of things you have to do to move on in this game, which takes gamers several hours if not days of gameplay to complete. This is indeed one of Capcom's best games, right up there with their Resident Evil series. It is a true survival horror game with darkened surroundings and plenty of surprises and jump scares. There are some flaws. At one point, ammo becomes scarce when you need it the most, but that could just be another challenge. The worst thing about this game is that at one point there is a puzzle that you have to solve. However, if you fail, you can't fix it. You'll have to reload from your last checkpoint and do it all over again. Despite that, the game is amazing and even has several different endings based on decisions that you make. If I was told to get rid of over half my game collection, Dino Crisis would be one of the games that I kept. It's fun, challenging, and has a great story. Can't wait to play the sequel. Gamers out there that haven't played this game, hunt it down and give it a try. It even has great replay value. My next game is the PlayStation 3's The Darkness. Released in 2007, you play a 21-year-old man named Jackie, who is a member of a mafia-like gang. After getting on the wrong side of his Uncle Paulie, Jackie finds that a price has been put out on his head. And if things weren't already bad enough, Jackie finds a strange darkness attaching itself to him and attempts to take him over. After Jackie's girlfriend Jenny is killed by his Uncle Paulie, Jackie vows revenge and attempts to use the darkness as his ally, however still attempts to find a way to control the darkness before it takes him over. All in all, this is a fun first-person game. Not only are you armed with several dual weapons and have plenty of enemies to use them in, but also the supernatural powers of the darkness are also fun, such as 2 eel-like tentacles that can stealthily attack enemies or even interact with areas such as unlocking doors from the other side or taking out power-to-power gates. You can also conjure up black holes to take out multiple enemies and also conjure up 4 different types of dark minions, each one with their own types of attacks. After killing enemies, you can use the tentacles to eat their hearts, and the more hearts you eat, the more powers you unlock. But Uncle Polly's men aren't the only enemy. Light is also an enemy. In the middle of firefights, you'll find yourself having to aim for light sources and take them out just so you can use the powers of the darkness to its fullest. There are several areas of environments in this game, but they aren't all that interesting, and despite being on the PlayStation 3, the graphics aren't as good as you could expect. Despite that, the worst thing about the game is the voice acting and volume. At the beginning of the game, you'll notice the lips of the characters don't match the actual talking, and in numerous parts of the game, you can barely hear the characters talking at all. But nobody is worse than Jackie himself. During loading screens, Jackie talks and you can hear him clear as day. However, during the actual game, he talks so low that you have to turn the volume up just to hear him. Other than that, the game is pretty fun. Along with the main story, you can also walk up to people and get plenty of side missions as well. I enjoyed this game. However, this game doesn't have a lot that pulls gamers back in for a replay. So this game is definitely worth a play, but this game is what I'd call a one and done. The final game of this video is Battlefield 1 for the PlayStation 4. It is the most recent release of the famous first-person military game series. This game is based off of World War I, and instead of playing one or two characters through one long campaign, the game has you playing through 6 smaller campaigns as 6 different characters. And each of the campaigns are different. One has you playing a pilot and allows you to participate in air battles. One has you running through the desert, and another one has you as a tank driver, getting involved in numerous tank battles, not to mention defending the tank from the outside. Besides the graphics being absolutely amazing and pushing the PlayStation 4 to the limit, Battlefield 1 introduces a new concept into military gaming. Unlike other military games where you just take on the enemies as they come at you, you can choose to take paths off to the side and attempt to sneak behind the enemy and silent melee attack them, making the mission longer, but maybe easier. And the environment is almost completely free roam. In one mission, you have to go through a town and look through engine parts for your tank. The game allows you to scope out the area and come up with a strategy. Do you just go in guns blazing, or do you attempt to be more stealth-like? It's a great concept that I hope catches on into other military games. This game is extremely fun, and though I prefer one long campaign, breaking the game into 6 smaller ones actually makes the game longer and a bit more enjoyable, allowing you to do practically anything, and apparently all the characters and missions are based on real people and missions of World War I. It's an amazing game, spectacular graphics, and plenty of replay value. Well, that's it on this list, but I'm just getting started. With over 300 games to complete and more being added to the collection, there will be plenty more games to come. Have you played any of these games I mentioned? What were your thoughts on them? Do you have any suggestion on games that I should play next? Give me a shout out in the comments. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a quest to continue.